Welcome to Annapolis Mosaics. Our program spotlights people in our community who are involved in activities designed to promote good human relations. I am Michael Keller, the chair of the Annapolis Human Relations Commission and your host. The commission is a city board that seeks to promote equal opportunity and to eliminate discrimination. My guests today are Annapolis Police Chief Ed Jackson. Chief, welcome to Annapolis Mosaics.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Chief, I'm going to ask some questions about a little bit about your background, which looking and reviewing it, I found to be fascinating.
Thank you.
Growing up, you were raised in a Baltimore public housing complex.
That's correct.
What were your experiences?
They're different than the experiences today. I grew up in a public housing projects in Southeast Baltimore in the 1960s. And it was a far more diverse community in those days than you see now. It was mixed race, mixed ethnicities. We were poor, but it was more of a community. And sadly, many public housing projects or public housing are no longer the communities that they once were.
You have pursued higher education.
Yes, sir.
Could you share with our viewers a little bit about the direction that you went in terms of college study?
Yes, I earned my Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice with a minor in print journalism from Coppin State College, now university.
Okay, yeah.
And from there I went on to earn my Master of Science degree from Johns Hopkins University. I was in the very first class of the Police Executive Leadership Program, where I received my Master of Science degree in Applied Behavioral Sciences, and my concentration was community development. And from there I went on to earned a certificate from the Senior Management Institute of Police, the Police Executive Research Forum, a Boston-based think tank in Boston, Massachusetts. From there, I went on to pursue my Doctor of Philosophy degree in Public Safety Leadership from Capella University. And I'm still pursuing that, actually. I'm in the dissertation phase. The title of my dissertation is The Impact of Absentee Fathers as Relates to Crime, Delinquency and Antisocial Behavior. I'm doing a quantitative correlational study just to show, using secondary data. This is simply meaning I'm taking stuff that's already existing and to show quantitatively that when fathers are absent, it creates social problems.
Could you relate a little bit about the highlights of your career path?
Yes, looking for an opportunity after I finished college, I joined the Baltimore Police Department in the late summer of 1982 and entered the academy in March of 1983. After I graduated from academy, I was signed to the Northeastern District, that's in Northeast Baltimore City, around Argonne Drive, Hillen Road, near Morgan State University. I remained there for 10 years. I was a foot patrol officer. I worked plain clothes, investigations. Did a number of things there. I worked with young people in community relations there. Had a wonderful time in my 10 years there. I was there from 1983 until 1993, and that's when I received my first promotion.
What attracted you to a career in law enforcement?
It's kind of interesting. I tell this, and I don't mean to be flippant or joking, but the first thing that drew me to it, to be honest, they said they would forgive my college loans if I took a public service job. You know,
That's not inconsequential.
Yeah, and in the early 20s, you don't really know what you want to do. But they said if you were a school teacher, became a school teacher, or you became a firefighter or a police officer. Then and remain in service for 7 years, then your loans could be forgiven. So that was the start of it. That wasn't the only reason why I did it. I was looking for something, because I grew up poor. I'm the first one in my family to earn a college degree, so I really wanted to do something with it. And law enforcement, out of the choices, law enforcement seemed pretty interesting, and so I thought I would do it long enough to pay off my student loans, and almost, 40 years later, I'm still here.
And what attracted you to the city of Annapolis?
Oh, a lot of things. I mean, it's a beautiful city. I've been coming here as a visitor and as a tourist, you know, a good part of my adult life. I always enjoyed coming here on the weekends to enjoy Main Street and the docks, just the idyllic scene of the city. But then when the opportunity came to become the police chief, my journey back into law enforcement, if I can backtrack a little bit,
Sure.
I served, over 20 years in Baltimore. I retired in 2004 to accept a faculty position. I taught sociology, criminal justice, and organizational management for 14 years. And then when Baltimore unfortunately went into consent decree as a result of the in-custody death of Freddie Gray, and they went under federal consent decree, I was asked if I would consider coming back as the Inspector General to kind of make sure that Baltimore remained, the city police department remained in compliance with the mandates of the paragraphs. It's 509 paragraphs. And so I became a certified Inspector General through the Association of Inspectors General at John Jay College in New York. And I did that for over a year, and then when the opportunity came to come to Annapolis, I took a stab, and I thought, what a wonderful opportunity. And I had served with my two predecessors, Chief Pristoop, and I'd served with Scott Baker as well in Baltimore City. Just thought it'd be a nice opportunity if it presented itself, and wonderfully it did.
Good. Let's talk about some issues now. Some of the things that have been discussed since you've become police chief, some of the things have been discussed before you were named police chief. But one of the issues that I believe you face is the status of cold cases. In 2016, Annapolis experienced an increase in homicides, and that led to unresolved murders. So what do you plan to do to try to crack these cold cases, especially those that involved homicides in which there was a taking of life?
Yes, sir. What I want to do is, and already begun the process, is to establish a cold case squad.
Okay.
And what a cold case squad does, it's a second set of eyes invariably, and it takes a second look at things that the initial investigation, either the officers didn't have time or the detectives didn't have time to do, or simply put, just a second set of eyes. Generally, cases start to go cold after the first 48 hours. Therein lies the term, the TV show 48 Hours. I've worked homicides in Baltimore City, and the first 48 hours, the first 2 days are crucial. It's not uncommon for a detective to literally work a case for 2 consecutive days without getting any sleep if they have leads that they have to continuously follow. The problem in Annapolis, we have roughly 16 cold cases, which is pretty high for a city this size. And what I propose to do is have a consultant come in and sit down with the great investigators I have. We have some really great investigators here in the city of Annapolis. The detectives who were already in place when I got here are doing a wonderful job. But to sit down with some subject matter experts and maybe look at some things that may have been missed the first time around, or just give it a second set of eyes. In fact, and the best of investigators always seek to get a second set of eyes. And I just wanted to really be clear about that. It's not that the initial investigation wasn't done properly, they were, but sometimes a second set of eyes, because sometimes the solvability of a crime is in the details. And so that's what we propose to do here. We don't want to put those cases on the shelf, because every individual victim has a story. They left behind a family, they left behind children, parents, siblings, sometimes grandparents, great-grandparents, cousins, uncles, aunts, and friends, people who cared about them. So each individual life, when somebody takes a life in violation of the law, it's an assault on a society, not only that individual and his or her family, but it's an assault on the entire system. And so it's very important that we hold those accountable and bring them to justice.
The Caucus of African American Leaders has called for the establishment of a civilian review board. And the Annapolis Human Relations Commission, of which I'm chair, has advocated the establishment of what we call a serious incident review board. It's similar to a civilian review board, but it would only kick in those circumstances in which there was a serious incident, specifically a shooting or an allegation of serious officer misconduct. The commission's position, differing from the caucus of African American leaders, is that we feel that officers shouldn't face a situation in which you have the civilian review board hearing cases in which you have some person saying, well, the officer looked at me in the wrong way or something like that. You're talking about having that kind of an external review panel only in the most serious cases. But regardless of the differences between the two, that has been a recommendation that's been made by both the caucus as well as by the Human Relations Commission in different forms, but was one of the very few that has not won favor from the chiefs of police in the past. There's been resistance from the departments on that particular issue. What's your thought about that concept of a civilian review board, and what would its place be if it was established within law enforcement in Annapolis? And if you got concerns about it, what would those concerns be?
Well, I'll answer the question with the concerns first. I'm in favor of civilian review boards, any type of community oversight. I think that the law enforcement has to be, in a democracy, accountable to the community. And I find that in my discussion with many of my colleagues, other chiefs, their concern is that people don't understand what a cop goes through, a police officer goes through, and they'll be unfairly judged without understanding procedure, without understanding the law, without understanding the Fourth Amendment covering seizure. And so many chiefs would feel that they can't protect their officers when they're officers. We ask officers to do a lot, and we ask police officers in this country, not only here in the city of Annapolis, but all over America, to take risks that most professions don't require. And so having said that, there's the foundation for that. I'm all for a civilian review board, but my caution is that to the community and to the government, make sure that the people who are chosen are selected carefully, vetted carefully, to make sure that they come into it with the mindset just to arrive at the truth and make recommendations to hold the officers accountable fairly, because you can't have it both ways. You can't ask them to go out there and take risk, and then if the optics of it is not what you would want it to be, then pander to special interests. So I would be in favor of a civilian review board, as long as the participants are willing to take a comprehensive course on police procedure, policies, and practices, and are vetted in a way to make sure that they can, as much as humanly possible, make assessments of officers' actions fairly. But I think that in cities where that's done appropriately, you see it more on the West Coast than you do on the East Coast. It's been very successful. So I have no issues with that, and as long as they're willing to work together. I favor here in Annapolis to have a civilian oversight that serves along with the sworn members. In other words, if an officer is accused of any allegation, then it would be investigated by the Civilian Review Board. But if charges, administrative charges are levied against the officers, then they would sit in the panel together and deliberate together. And that helps build trust. And also the statistics shows that a lot of people don't talk about that. A lot of times civilians can be more lenient than sworn members. And the whole idea of officers police departments disciplining their own was this concept that nobody else understands what a cop does but another cop. And so if an officer engages in an act of misconduct, the only people who can fairly assess it is people who knows what an officer does. So I am in favor of any type of civilian oversight as long as it's done properly. Training is key.
Community policing is a common theme in law enforcement. What is your perspective about it, and how would you integrate it into policing in the Annapolis Police Department?
Yes, sir. First of all, I would say my personal definition of community policing, it's a philosophy.
Yeah.
It's more of a noun than a verb. I think the noun part of it leads to good verbs, good action steps. And my definition is that when police officers and the community work together to mutually agree upon a course of action to solve problems in the community, and many of those problems can be social. And so in order to engage in a good community policing department, first of all, the philosophy of community policing has to be clearly articulated and well defined. That means every man and woman who serves in that department has to understand what the philosophy is and how that transitions into actually performing what needs to be done to make sure that the communities are improved, or the quality of life. They address quality of life issues. Community policing is not strict enforcement. It's more of a maintenance order model whereby the community residents and the police department work together to solve problems. The problems could be the lighting in public housing. It could be shrubbery, overgrown shrubbery that contributes to crime and social disorganization. It could be qualitative things like my son, he's hanging on the corner because he has no direction. He doesn't want to engage in criminal activity, but he's frustrated and he doesn't know what to do. And we can pair officers who have certain skills, educational skills, and specialized skills to help people work towards, solving their problems. Critics of community policing argue that it's social work. I disagree. I agree that our role should be to prevent crime, not react to it. And the community policing model promotes prevention as opposed to it's proactivity as opposed to reactivity.
The Annapolis Human Relations Commission did a study, was requested by the Caucus of African American Leaders, and ultimately the caucus made it public. The report was circulated to the mayor and to city council, and it dealt with the relationship between the Annapolis police and the minority community in the city. And we had at that time, there was at the same time, it sort of coincided with a program that was organized by then Chief Pristoop, in which he brought together a coalition of different groups into it was a community program that was designed to explore that specific issue. And the commission, in preparing its report, leaned very heavily on the experiences that we had, the conversations that we had with both police as well as community leaders at this event. And what we found, again, if you look at it in terms of, first of all, let's look at African Americans. And again, you've got Annapolis is about around 25% the population is African American. You've got the public housing complexes, which are overwhelmingly African American in terms of it. What we found is rather interesting is that there was, among both police as well as in terms of residents, that there seemed to be a level of distrust. And I guess that would be the best way of doing it. There was distrust among a lot of the community people about the police, a lot of distrust about the officers about those communities. They felt that the feeling of the residents were that I'm not sure that we can really bank on the police being with us if we have a problem. The officers said we don't think these communities want us around. Yeah, that were African Americans. Latinos, that's a whole different separate case. What you had with the Latinos, many of them coming from, possibly almost all of them, coming from countries in Central America where the police were not their friends.
Right.
They were violent. The police were violent. They were corrupt. In some case, murderous. And these immigrants have brought into their involvement in the community here in Annapolis with a built-in suspicion. I mean, they think that they're police, and they think that the police are going to be like they experience in their home countries, and have been for a time very, very reluctant, not wanting the police to have anything to do with them. Now, I know that there's been a lot of work done by the Annapolis police in dealing with both of those situations. But I'd like to get your perspective on it in terms of how can the police department outreach to communities of color in the city to try to overcome some of these impressions and perceptions.
Yes, sir, and a lot of it's happening now, actually. I was pleasantly surprised when I arrived here, and I'd heard some of the same things, and we're doing some outreach now where Lieutenant Krause, who's involved in community outreach, along with Patty Norse, who's a civilian, she does it, and many others, Sergeant Vaden, they all are, when I got here in early August, and I was confirmed on July 31st, and I think my first day was like August the 3rd, and right away I was briefed on some of the events that occurred, taking young people from public housing on fishing trips, showing them the Chesapeake Bay, teaching them about nature, taking them to places that their parents either couldn't afford to take them or just wasn't aware of, and so I was delighted about that. As police chief, what I want to do is expound on that. That's some tremendous work that they're doing, but I just want to expound on it. And my two predecessors, both Chief Pristoop and as well as Chief Scott Baker, has established a police foundation, police foundation and a police advisory board. But I really want to focus on the advisory board, which is a nice cross section of Annapolitans and people who are stakeholders here in the city, and we meet in my boardroom once a month, and we discuss issues. I think that the most pressing thing, as to your question lines up nicely with what I propose to do. And first of all, let's define what crime is. Crime is only a manifestation of social problems. A lot of times I hear social scientists say it incorrectly that social problems develop from crime. It's the other way around. And if we don't address the issues, many of them are rooted in historic racism, not all, but many. You know the history of this country. And there's a cycle, a way of thinking that hasn't been interrupted. What I mean by that is that you know, you have people who were underserved, and poverty triggers a lot of other behaviors we don't want in any community. And Annapolis is a very beautiful city, very diverse. You have a lot of wealth here, a lot of influence here, but then at the same time, you don't have to go very far to see abject or hopeless poverty. What I propose to do is work with these communities. You know, we can't turn their economics around, but we can surely help them to think differently about where they live and to improve the quality of life, you know, where they're at. You know, for example, if we could get in there and partner with community colleges to bring about vocational training, we can teach them public safety. We can teach them how crime through environmental design can negatively impact your community, but if we eradicate it and turn some of those environmental designs around, they can see a marked improvement in their overall safety, so that children can go out and play on a hot summer day without worrying about getting caught in the crossfire. Identify offenders and really petition the courts to do something about them. Change just the atmosphere through activities like the Police Athletic League and the Boys and Girls Clubs, and heavily have a presence in those communities, and you'd be surprised of they'll see us differently because now we're part of the solution and we're not doing the bidding. See, in many African American communities, not only in Annapolis but all throughout America, many see the police as doing the bidding of the government that mistreated them, real or perceived. In their minds, it's real, and so all the police are doing is suppressing some of the problems and not helping them work through it. A well-run police department and some of your most dynamic police leaders understand that if you don't attack the social problems and build that trust, then you're never going to have the relationship with the community and disadvantaged communities that you would want them to have, because the prevailing thought is that, well, they're only doing the bidding for people who don't mean us any good, and that's not what policing does. I think it's one of the most honorable professions that you'll see anywhere. The men and women are very dedicated, black, white, Latino, and we have a diverse police department. I'm proud of that about Annapolis too, not to veer off the subject, but we have the type of diversity that you would want anywhere here in Annapolis. We have Asian officers, we have officers, we have black, we have white, we have Latino. We have just a nice group that should be the model for the region, I would argue. And we have to make sure we use them properly. And most of them are dedicated to, I haven't seen one, not one yet. And I've been here 3 months that's not dedicated to really serving the Annapolis, all Annapolis communities. And I'll just end with this. I don't want it to appear too, because I don't want any of this to be misunderstood. I think we have to celebrate prosperity too. And I want to be a police chief for all Annapolitans, all people who reside here. I want them to be able to see me as somebody who's just does his very best to promote a good police department that everybody can trust and not vilify prosperity. But we also have to do something about the people who are less fortunate too, because then that undermines the whole spirit of a community. If people who are underserved and underprivileged doesn't feel that they're a part of Annapolis, then that creates problems, crime problems for everybody in Annapolis, not just the police department.
Thank you for viewing our program today, and please join us again on Annapolis Mosaics. If you would like more information about the Annapolis Human Relations Commission, jot down the information on your screen. You can reach us at 410-263-7998 or by email at hrcommission@annapolis.gov, or check out our page at the City of Annapolis website. Go to www.annapolis.gov, click on the city government icon, then the boards and commissions icon, and you can scroll down to the Human Relations Commission page. And always remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "We have flown the air like birds and swum the seas like fishes, but have yet to learn the simple act of walking the earth as brothers and sisters."